Okay, think about your day. Seriously. How many times have you, instinctively grabbed your phone? Maybe checked Instagram, Twitter, whatever your go-to is.
It's almost automatic, isn't it?
Exactly. Social media is just there. This
Yeah.
constant background hum, right? Promising connection, keeping us in the loop.
Giving us that window onto everything.
But have you ever actually stopped and wondered if all that connecting is maybe making us feel a bit, well, less connected?
Yeah. It's a strange feeling.
That's the big question we're digging into today. Is social media really bringing us together, or is it kind of subtly pushing us apart?
It's such a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
This idea that you could be surrounded by online friends, followers, whatever, and still feel isolated.
Right.
Researchers actually call it the social media paradox. And that's exactly what we want to explore in this deep dive.
Okay.
We've gone through 3 really solid, peer-reviewed studies to try and get a clearer picture of what's actually happening.
Perfect. So our mission today is basically to cut through all the noise, the endless scrolling, and pull out the key insights from this research for you.
Yeah, kind of a shortcut.
Exactly. A shortcut to understanding this, let's face it, pretty confusing relationship between social media and, how we actually feel, without getting totally bogged down in data.
Right. So where should we start? Maybe how we use it.
Yeah, I think that's crucial, because we don't all use it the same way, do we?
No, definitely not. And that first study by Huang back in 2017 really drives that point home.
Okay.
It was a meta-analysis. So basically, they looked at the combined results of 63 different studies. Huge amount of data.
Wow, 63 studies.
And one of the biggest things they found was this clear distinction between passive consumption and active engagement.
Okay, break that down. Passive consumption, that's just the scrolling, right?
Yeah.
Mindlessly watching everyone else's stuff.
Pretty much. Like you said, wandering through that digital gallery of perfect moments. And Huang's analysis linked that kind of passive use, the scrolling, with higher levels of depressive symptoms.
Okay, that makes sense.
But on the flip side, active engagement,
Yeah.
Actually commenting, sending messages, interacting directly with people, that seem to be linked with better well-being.
So it really matters what you're doing on there, not just that you are on there.
Exactly. The how is critical.
This brings up that whole social comparison thing for me. It feels almost unavoidable sometimes.
Oh, definitely.
You're scrolling, seeing these super curated, maybe even idealized versions of life, especially for younger people, right? It must be hard not to compare your own, normal day to these highlight reels.
It really can be. And that comparison can easily spark feelings of envy or inadequacy. The study points that out too.
Yeah, I catch myself doing it, scrolling and thinking, wow, everyone's having way more fun, even though I know it's just a snapshot.
It's a very human thing to do. And the Huang study really frames social media as this double-edged sword. It's not automatically good or bad. Used actively, intentionally, it can strengthen connections, offer support. But if it's mostly that passive scrolling and constant comparing, then, yeah, the impact seems much more likely to be negative.
Okay, so that's one big piece. Active versus passive. What about the sheer amount of time we spend? Does that matter?
Well, that leads us nicely into the second study we looked at. This one was by Paglinawan and his team, also in 2017.
All right, and what were they looking at?
They focused specifically on the link between how much time people spent on social media and how socially isolated they felt. Not just whether they were alone, but that feeling of loneliness.
And what did they find?
It was pretty striking, actually. They surveyed about 1,700 young adults in the U.S. And found that the people in the top quarter, the heaviest users, reported feeling twice as socially isolated as the people who used it least.
Wait, twice? That seems completely backward.
It really does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You'd think more online connection equals less loneliness.
Yeah, so why? What's the theory there?
The researchers suggested a couple of things. One idea is that all this digital communication, while easy, might be kind of replacing or weakening our real-world ties.
Like it feels easier to send a quick DM than to, actually call someone or meet up.
Exactly. And those face-to-face interactions, that deeper stuff, that's really vital for genuine connection. It's different.
It's like snacking. Instead of having a proper meal, maybe, fills a gap short term, but doesn't truly nourish.
That's a great way to put it. And the Primac study also pointed to late-night social media use.
Ah, the bedtime scroll.
Yeah. They found a link between that and feeling more lonely. Could be messing with sleep, which affects mood.
Sure.
And also it just physically takes away time you might otherwise spend, actually with people.
Okay, so the takeaway from that study is spending a lot of time scrolling might create this kind of illusion of connection.
Exactly. An illusion. Well, underneath, it could actually be eroding those real relationships and contributing to loneliness.
Wow, okay. Quality over quantity, maybe.
That seems to be a running theme. But it's important to add some nuance here, which brings us to the third study.
All right, let's hear it.
This one's by Orban and Przylski from 2019. And it's interesting because it looked at a huge number of adolescents, like 350,000 of them.
Whoa, okay, massive study. What did they find? Did it line up with the others?
Well, yes and no. They found that the link between using digital tech, including social media, and lower well-being was actually surprisingly small.
Really?
Yeah.
Smaller than you'd expect.
Yeah. In fact, they found the impact was less significant than other factors in these kids' lives, like, say, being bullied or how much support they felt from their family.
Huh. Okay, that adds some important context, doesn't it?
It really does. It suggests maybe the negative effects are sometimes, blown out of proportion a bit, or at least we need to see them relative to other big life factors.
So it's not the main driver of unhappiness for most teens, perhaps.
That's what their findings seem to suggest. And crucially, they also emphasize that how the technology is used, the purpose behind it, might matter more than just counting screen time minutes.
Okay, so back to that how again. Are you using it to connect meaningfully? To learn? Or is it just killing time?
Precisely. It's not this simple black and white picture. Social media bad.
Yeah.
The context, the individual, what you're actually doing online, all that matters.
So these studies give us a pretty complex picture. Passive use linked to feeling worse, heavy use linked to isolation. But maybe the overall negative impact isn't as huge as we think, and how we use it is key.
You've got it. And we can actually use some broader theories from sociology and psychology to understand why this paradox exists.
Okay, like what? Let's get theoretical for a second.
Well, take symbolic interactionism. It's a sociological perspective.
Right. Remind us what that is.
Essentially, it looks at how we create meaning through symbols and interactions.
Mm.
And in the social media world, think about likes, followers, shares. These become symbols.
Symbols of approval.
Popularity. Exactly. And symbolic interactionism might suggest that if we start relying too heavily on these digital symbols for our sense of self-worth or connection,
They might not be enough. They're substitutes for the real thing.
that's the idea. The interactions can become more superficial. We might equate getting 100 likes with feeling genuinely valued, but maybe it doesn't meet that deeper human need for belonging.
That makes a lot of sense. Trading depth for easily measured symbols.
Yeah. And then there's social capital theory. This looks at our networks and relationships as a form of capital, something valuable.
Okay.
We can think about two types here, bonding and bridging capital.
Bonding and bridging. Explain those.
So bonding capital is about our strong ties family, close friends. Think deep connections within a tight-knit group.
Right.
Online groups, like a private chat with your best friends, can definitely strengthen that bonding capital. That's a positive.
But there's a potential downside.
Well, yeah. If we focus too much on just those online groups, we might become a bit insular, maybe less exposed to different ideas outside our bubble.
Okay, so that's bonding. What's bridging?
Bridging capital comes from our weaker ties acquaintances, people outside our immediate circle. These connections kind of bridge different social groups and expose us to new perspectives, information, opportunities.
Like following someone online who shares interesting articles on a topic you don't know much about.
Exactly. The potential issue here is that if we spend so much time online, we might have fewer chances for those spontaneous real-world interactions that build bridging capital, chatting with someone new at a coffee shop, that kind of thing.
So we might be deepening some close ties online, but maybe narrowing our broader social world.
It's a possibility, yeah, a potential trade-off to be aware of.
Okay. And psychologically, what's happening in our brains?
Well, we've touched on upward social comparison already, seeing those perfect lives and feeling bad about our own. Research, like Vogel's work back in 2014, really highlighted how that fuels anxiety and depression.
Right, the comparison trap.
And then there's the whole dopamine thing, the way our brains react to notifications, likes, shares.
Ah, yes, the little reward hits.
Exactly. They create these powerful feedback loops. It's unpredictable reinforcement like a slot machine, which makes it really compelling and, frankly, kind of addictive. It keeps us coming back for more, even if it's not making us feel great overall.
It definitely explains why it can be so hard to just put the phone down sometimes.
For sure.
Okay, so we've unpacked the paradox, looked at the research, considered the theories. What do we do about it? How do we navigate this in our own lives?
Right. This is the crucial part, isn't it? Moving from understanding to action. What are some practical, evidence-based strategies?
Yeah, what can you actually do starting today?
Well, one big thing is cultivating what people are starting to call digital mindfulness.
Okay, mindfulness, but for your phone.
Sort of, yeah. It's about being more intentional. Before you just reflexively open an app and start scrolling, maybe take a breath, pause, ask yourself, why am I doing this right now? Am I looking for connection or just distraction? Is it likely to be meaningful or just mindless?
I like that, bringing conscious thought to an unconscious habit.
Exactly. Just that small pause can make a difference. Another strategy is around scheduling your use.
Like setting limits.
Yeah, or at least being more deliberate. Try to avoid that late-night scrolling we talked about. The Primax study suggested it's linked to worse sleep and more loneliness.
Right, protect your sleep.
And maybe designate specific times to check social media, rather than letting it interrupt you constantly throughout the day. Create some boundaries.
That sounds sensible. What else?
Curate your feed. Be ruthless.
Uh-huh, okay. How so?
Unfollow accounts that consistently make you feel bad, trigger that negative comparison, or just stress you out. Be honest with yourself about how certain content makes you feel.
And replace it with?
Actively follow things that are positive. Educational content, inspiring people, accounts related to your hobbies, things that genuinely connect you to others in a good way. Make your feed work for you, not against you.
So take control of your digital environment. Don't just be a passive consumer.
Precisely. And remember the social aspect. Use these tools to actually facilitate real-world connection.
You mean use DMs to actually plan a coffee date?
Yes. Use the platforms as a springboard for face-to-face interaction. That hybrid approach digital tools enhancing real life that seems really promising.
Using it as a tool, not just a destination.
Exactly. And finally, media literacy. This is huge.
Meaning?
Understanding how these platforms work. Recognizing that content is curated, often algorithm-driven. Knowing that what you see isn't the whole story. Developing that critical eye helps you resist the negative comparisons and pressures.
Being a smarter consumer of the information, basically.
Yeah. Understanding the difference between a curated online persona and, actual messy reality.
Okay, so mindfulness, scheduling, curating, hybrid socializing, and media literacy. That's a solid toolkit.
It really is. And it brings us back to that core idea, doesn't it?
That the paradox isn't inherent in the tech itself.
Right. It's not that social media is inherently good or evil. It's all about how we engage with it, our patterns or intentions.
Yeah. For most of us, I guess the answer isn't just deleting everything. It's about finding a healthier way to integrate it, making more conscious choices.
Absolutely. And the research really points to that. True connection, the kind that boosts well-being, seems to require that intentionality. It's more than just clicks and likes.
It demands active engagement, prioritizing real-world stuff, too, and being aware of those pitfalls like passive scrolling and comparison.
You got it.
So as we wrap up, maybe here's something for you, the listener, to think about. Take an honest look at your own digital habits. Where does social media enrich your life? Where does it maybe drain you or lead you down those comparison rabbit holes?
And building on that.
Yeah.
What's one small concrete step you could take this week, based on what we've talked about, to maybe nudge those habits in a direction that fosters more genuine connection, both online and offline? What would that look like for you?